clinically the most effective healthcare intervention for a whole slew of root cause chronic conditions are these effective lifestyle interventions that we're underwriting and trying to make possible for people to afford, and unlock with low friction.
You're listening to the Clean Kitchen Podcast with Kyle and Kevin Fitzgerald. Justin Mayers, thanks for coming on the podcast, man. We're happy to talk to you today.
Yeah, great to be here. Super excited.
Yes. So I have listened to a bunch of other podcasts you've been on, been following you on Twitter for a little while, reading your blogs. You got a ton of fantastic information out there. And something I've heard you talk about before are some pretty staggering stats. So 60% of Americans are living with at least one chronic disease, 80% of Americans are overweight, and 15% of teens are overweight. So in your opinion, like how did we get here? Like why is America so sick today?
Yeah, it's a great question. Frankly, and without exaggeration, I think it's one of the most important questions in the country right now. And so I think that like what I think is happening is basically Americans, I think two things happen at once. Basically, shortly after World War II, or during World War II, you saw a lot of food production in the U.S. move from sort of more local, sort of focused, where we had local farmers raising things seasonally, people ate seasonally, like that was the majority of the American diet. And during World War II, there was this big demand for not only like supporting troops abroad, but also just like creating food that could power people, that you could ship overseas, that would last a long time. Like it was basically wartime necessities. And I think that was, in my view, really when the American food system started moving away from, locality, seasonality, nutrient density, all these things sort of by default, into caring much more about, is it shelf stable? Is it expensive? And can we make it addictive and taste good? And, coming back after the war ended, you started to see these massive agriculture companies, these massive food companies, that were producing staples of the American food system and optimizing not for nutrient density, but for hyper addictive flavor, for shelf stability, for palatability. And I think that those trends have accelerated over the last, 60, 70 years and gotten to the point where today, 70% of the American diet is ultra processed foods. Almost no one is eating seasonally, almost no one is eating locally, and almost everyone is missing a significant number of nutrients from their diet. And so I think that at the core, this is sort of the issue with our food system, with the American environment. And then when you take that approach and you couple it with, a country that generally believes in freedom, I think that's like a great thing broadly. But in some areas, like the way that we regulate chemicals and things like that, I think it does a disservice to the country more than it helps it. And so I think when you kind of couple these things together, what the end result is basically the sickest population of Americans that the world has ever, of humans that the world has ever seen. And that's kind of where we are today. I think we have a food system that poisons the average American, and then a medical system that profits off of the illness that is created by, our very unnatural environments. And that I think is like this, just the biggest problem.
Yeah. And it does feel like it's a cycle too, because once you get in, you kind of get trapped in this. But I want to first double click on the food system. And you talked about these big companies, but if I look at these big companies from simply a capitalist perspective, they're trying to maximize profit and maximize revenue. And they seem to be doing a great job at that. What is it that we can do to change their incentives so that they're incentivized to help make Americans healthy instead of just maximizing shareholder value?
Yeah, so I've thought a lot about this. I mean, frankly, I think that there are not great ways, at least that I've come up with, to kind of address this problem. What I think we can do though is we basically right now, local farmers, small agriculture movements are not competing on an even playing field with big food. Like big food, big agriculture, they basically use around $4 billion a year of crop subsidies to grow primarily corn, soy, wheat. Those inputs are artificially cheap. Because they're artificially cheap, they end up in everything. And that's why you basically see corn, soy, wheat are inputs in almost every product and almost every ultra processed food in the country. And so, I think that that is one of the big issues, is that we're actually incentivizing people to be sick, to like eat ultra processed foods and all these sorts of things by making them artificially cheap. The second thing is I think that we are only now starting to realize the extent to which our taste buds and hyperpalatability and these sorts of things have been weaponized against the average person. The average person that doesn't understand anything about like health, nutrition, things like this. They like these companies have basically hijacked our taste buds, our limbic system to get us eating more of their hyper palatable, fake thing. Like Twinkies, admittedly, if you're like growing up and whatnot, Twinkies taste better than many of like the conventional and crappy fruits that people are eating in the in the grocery store. And I think that it's this sort of engineering foods to be addictive and desirable, combined with what makes foods desirable and addictive is like oftentimes artificial ingredients and ultra processed ingredients, has led to both the demand and the supply ratcheting up of a huge amount of these ultra processed foodstuffs that I think make up literally the majority of the average American's diet today.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I think this is something that at least I've struggled with quite a bit. Proponent of free market and capitalism, and yeah, something that I think a lot of people have benefited from. But there is this idea that more and more regulation is needed in this space, and that's something that I think people have a hard time being proponents of, because that's something typical free market enthusiasts are against. And
well,
yeah, go ahead.
I think it's like, I do think it is like a twofold thing. Yeah. Like we don't actually have a free market in this area. Like we have basically companies that are the government that is artificially subsidizing a ton of agricultural inputs. Mm-hmm. And if that wasn't happening, like I think that you would see local food systems hugely outcompeting many of these big foodstuffs. Like the reason that a bakery in where I live in Austin, Texas, is making like a whole grain loaf of bread, and it's more expensive than like Wonder Bread that you buy on the shelf somewhere, like that is not natural. Like if you look at a sort of a loaf of bread or something made in Austin, it doesn't have storage requirements, distribution requirements, doesn't have to be trucked thousands of miles, like all these sorts of things. Like the cost that goes into like making, producing, transporting, storing these big food items should make these products more expensive than the locally produced version, and it just doesn't. And I think a big reason for that is crop subsidies, and and I think that a big reason for that is like we don't actually have a free market here. We have a highly subsidized and poorly influenced market, in my view.
Yeah, completely agree. I think this was like the realization moment for me, is understanding that this is a broken, rigged game. It's not a free market truly as it has maybe appeared to be on the surface.
Yeah, exactly. And I wish it was. Like I really do think that local food systems, nutrient dense things, like things that are made well with seasonality, do win out when you have a market that's not rigged and doesn't have sort of a thumb on the scale. And even more than that, like I think right now you're actually seeing companies like Kettle and Fire and like tons of these local companies that are starting up, local bakeries, local farmers markets, CSAs, membership in these things are exploding. Like we are starting to see the local food movement start to really do well and gather momentum, even against the backdrop of like everything local, everything healthy is more expensive for you, and it's just like not necessarily good.
Yeah. People I think are wakening up to this yes, idea here,
exactly,
which is really exciting. All of the trends, all the tailwinds feel like they're at the back of this movement towards local, healthy eating. One of which is TrueMed, which I want to talk about. Maybe just starting with, if people aren't familiar, what is TrueMed, but then also the idea behind it. How did you come up with this idea for subsidizing health-conscious, health-related purchases?
Yeah, so one of the reasons, so I started a company called Kettle and Fire. It's a bone broth brand. We were one of the first companies to like source grass-fed, grass-finished, really invest in great standards. Since then, we've launched a regenerative bone broth. We've launched like a wild harvested venison bone broth, which is the first of its kind. We're in pretty much every grocery store near you. And so starting that company and growing it, when we launched, we had a product that was like $14.99. So it was pretty expensive for a box of bone broth. And because it was expensive, we got a lot of feedback from customers. I was like, this is really expensive. I'd love to buy it, but it's very expensive. And now, like 9 years in, our product on average is like somewhere around $7.49 to $7.99. So the cost has come down a little under half, and we still get people saying like, this is very expensive. And so, so what I have been thinking about in my experience running Kettle and Fire is just like, we make a high quality product. It's one that I think Americans would be healthier if they ate more of. And yet we are just constrained by, and our market size is constrained by economics, just like, it's expensive to do things the right way. It's expensive to have long cook times and the sourcing standards that we do. And so I was sort of attuned to what are ways that we can align incentives and make it possible for people, and incentivize people to make choices where they're investing in the healthier option. And that's when, my co-founder, Calley, he and I teamed up and we were talking. One of our advisors, actually, Dr. Mark Hyman, was talking to us about HSA, FSA accounts, and specifically this idea that there's something called a letter of medical necessity. And a letter of medical necessity is basically this thing that a doctor or medical practitioner can write that says, based on your specific condition, if you have a condition that you're working to treat, reverse, or prevent, diabetes, cardiovascular disease, obesity, whatever, a doctor can write a letter for you that says, it is medically necessary that you and that you are allowed to spend your tax-free health savings account dollars, HSA account dollars, or FSA account dollars on something like a gym membership, sleeping aids, supplements, in some cases, even like healthier food. And so what we realized is that if you're using tax-free money, you basically are getting 30 to 50% savings on many of these items, like a gym membership, supplements, whatever, that people want to spend money on. And so we had this kind of insight that we could build a payment tool, like a platform, where we could help make it easy for someone who qualifies to get a letter of medical necessity. And if we could make that easy and low friction, that, hopefully millions of people could start spending their health health savings account money, HSA and FSA money, on interventions that are effective root cause lifestyle interventions, and not just like pills and prescriptions and other sorts of things after they're already sick. And so our whole goal as a company is we want to make it easy and to facilitate more and more dollars in our healthcare system, which is very broken, going towards effective root cause lifestyle interventions, as opposed to today, where someone basically waits to get sick, and then only once they're sick do they start to spend these dollars on like pharmaceuticals, pills, prescriptions, things like that.
We all know how important it is to drink more water, but let's be real, it's hard to trust what's coming out of the tap. And studies show that 3 out of 4 homes in America have harmful contaminants in their tap water, and some reports even say virtually every home has them. That is why I use AquaTrue. It's the only water purifier I trust, and unlike ordinary pitcher filters, AquaTrue uses 4-stage reverse osmosis purification process to remove 15 times more contaminants, including things like PFAs, microplastics, chlorine, fluoride, arsenic, and so many more. And honestly, I could taste the difference immediately. My coffee, my tea, and even the water that I use to cook with just tastes so much cleaner. And the best part, no installation or plumbing is required. All you do is plug it in and you're set. AquaTrue is giving our listeners 20% off any purifier. Just go to aquatrue.com and use code CLEANKITCHEN at checkout. That's AQUATRU.com and enter Clean Kitchen, CLEANKITCHEN, to get 20% off. It's got a 30-day money-back guarantee, so there's no reason not to try it. Start drinking water the way it is meant to be. Clean, pure, and actually safe. You ever wake up and just feel older? Like you didn't even do anything crazy the night before, but somehow your joints are stiff, your sleep was terrible, and your energy is shot. Well, I've been there too, and aging sneaks up on you. And honestly, feeling good as we get older isn't just about looking good, but it's about keeping your body strong on a cellular level. And that is why I'm excited to share something that I've added into my own daily routine, and it is Fatty 15. It's a first of its kind supplement made with C15-0. This is a newly discovered essential fatty acid that's been missing from our diets. And I'm not just throwing that word around. Essential means our body actually needs it. And most of us aren't getting nearly enough. When our cells are low in C15, they get fragile. And when our cells break down, we age faster. So Fatty 15 helps restore and protect your cells, leading to better sleep, more energy, smoother joints, and even better heart, liver, and metabolic health. And I have personally felt the difference. It's backed by over 100 studies developed by doctors who originally discovered this working with aging dolphins. Yes, I'm serious. And this product is totally vegan, it's clean, and it comes in a beautiful glass jar with zero junk added. Fatty 15 is on a mission to optimize your C15 levels to help you live healthier longer. If you want to support your health from the inside out and maybe even help your parents or loved ones feel better too, check out Fatty 15. You can get an additional 15% off their 90-day subscription starter kit by going to fatty15.com/cleankitchen and use code cleankitchen at checkout. Now back to the show. Yeah. So what's the process? So like if I go onto a website, will it say like TrueMed, you can pay for this with TrueMed or something like that? Or
Yeah. So it's exactly. So for example, if you go to Peloton today, you can go to Peloton, you can hit pay with TrueMed, select TrueMed as like a payment method, just like you would select Affirm or PayPal or anything like that. And you go through and fill out a 90-second question survey, basically, or 90-second survey. Think of it, it's kind of like going into a doctor's office and saying like, here's my height, weight, here's where I live, here's the things I'm working to treat, reverse, or prevent. And then assuming that you qualify and you're working to treat, alleviate, or prevent a specific chronic condition, you'll get matched with one of the doctors in our network who can decide to issue or not a letter of medical necessity. And that letter is what actually makes it compliant for you to spend your tax-free HSA, FSA money on these root cause interventions. And so that's kind of like the process in a nutshell, I would say.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
And it truly is insanely efficient. I did it for an organ meat supplement. Yeah. And I went through the process. I have Crohn's, Kyle. We both have Crohn's. And so I just documented that on the form. And it was honestly within 15 minutes, I received the approval. It was incredibly fast. And now I just use my HSA money to purchase every month the supplements that I need. So highly recommend everyone going to check it out. It's really cool.
That's awesome. Yeah. And this is, some people are like, is this a loophole? Like, how does this work? And, our kind of argument is we spend a ton of time talking to doctors, talking to lawyers, talking to people in the space. And literally the standard of care today, if you walk into a doctor's office and you say, I'm worried about my cholesterol, or I have a family history of high cholesterol, they will write you a prescription on the spot without asking any further questions to put you on a statin. That's why statins are the most prescribed drug in America, because people prescribe them all the time. And yet, if you look at the research, if you look at comparing statins versus exercise, statins versus sleeping interventions, statin versus food interventions, these lifestyle interventions work better than statins in almost every case. And so for, our argument as a company, why we exist, and, the battle that we're fighting with the traditional medical system is just like, these tax advantage dollars, nowhere does the IRS, which controls what an HSA and FSA code is, nowhere do they say that these dollars have to go towards a pill made by a pharmaceutical company. It's like they have to go towards healthcare interventions. And generally, they should go towards what is the most effective healthcare intervention. And if you look at those studies, like clinically, the most effective healthcare intervention for a whole slew of root cause chronic conditions are these effective lifestyle interventions that we're underwriting and trying to make possible for people to afford, and unlock with low friction.
Yeah, absolutely. Then the obvious next question to me becomes, why aren't doctors doing this on their own? Why does TrueMed effectively need to exist? Why can't a doctor just write this form with the patient that they're seeing? Why aren't they doing that?
Yeah. So there's sort of there's like the conspiracy theory answer, which I think has some truth, which is like they're not incentivized to. And then I think there's, like doctors they're busy. The average patient sees their doctor, I think it's like 7 minutes a year or something like that. And in that period, if someone walks in with obesity or concerns about high cholesterol, you can either sit them down, ask them about their diet. What did you eat over the last couple of months? How often do you exercise? Or you can put them on a statin, and that's like the standard of care. That's what everyone expects you to do. And you can go on and see more patients and like make slightly more money in doing so. That's maybe the conspiracy theory, or like the unflattering answer. I think another answer too is just like, you look at the medical schools, and medical schools are mostly funded by grants from pharma companies. And when you look at these schools, like 80% of medical schools teach literally 0 nutrition classes. It's just not really considered when it comes to thinking about, how to educate our upcoming crop of doctors. And because it's not true, because it's not taught, I think that it really goes against how the average doctor thinks about, what class of interventions should I give this person when they're walking into my doctor's office and telling me that they're struggling with X, Y, or Z chronic condition.
Yeah. Yeah. It's sad, but I do feel like it has a lot of truth to it. The conspiracy version there.
Yeah.
Because a lot of people can
Me too,
relate.
but it is sad.
Yeah. It's not the rosy answer that maybe we would love to hear, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And then, so I guess there's all this. TrueMed does an incredible job at effectively making it cheaper for people to get these health and lifestyle interventions. I think you've done a great job getting that. I'm curious what it's like working with Calley, because obviously we've watched Calley on a bunch of other podcasts. He is extremely well-spoken and one of the most passionate people I've ever seen. What is it like working with Calley on a day-to-day basis?
Yeah, it's great. I mean, he has been like, he has done a job that you can't hire someone to do from like, from a, like if we had started the company and the game plan was like, one of us is going to become like the special advisor to RFK, talking about like all of these root cause chronic things, and we're going to make the MAHA movement happen. It's like, you wouldn't really believe that was even possible.
Yeah.
And so I really think that he is a big reason in my view for the MAHA stuff happening. And I think he's an incredibly passionate guy. And that, as you can tell over, the last year, 2 years of him talking about this issue, that approach and his passion and knowledge and, everything has just resonated to a truly incredible degree that has led to, the book selling like 1 million+ copies, and him being like a really integral part in driving this mission that I think is so important and driving the focus on these lifestyle interventions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, absolutely. I think he's one of the key players there. We had Jason Karp on a couple weeks ago. We were speaking with him about this whole MAHA movement, but would love your perspective on it too, being someone that's on the front lines of it. We talked a lot about the kind of the snap back and forth with Jason, but would kind of love your perspective, how you've gotten involved with this and what your thoughts are of it.
I think it's great that this is such a focus area. Like, I really think that this is one of the most important issues in the country. And I think that it's amazing that it's getting the recognition and people understand that this is a big deal and things are not good. And so I think, I'm very, very encouraged and excited that for the first time, certainly in my lifetime, I think possibly ever, like, health has actually become a voting issue. And that is not necessarily something that I thought I would see at any point soon. And so to see just like how many people are feeling strongly like that this is an issue they want to stand behind, it's an issue they want to vote on, that more than anything is what has me so excited about everything that is happening, from the standpoint of MAHA. Like, I really do think that, yes, it's great that RFK is in, and I think from a chronic disease standpoint, food system standpoint, he's going to be one of the most important cabinet appointees that we've had. I also, though, think that the bigger change and the more important change is that the chronic disease stuff and the MAHA stuff it's on people's minds, and it's at the forefront of how they're thinking about things, making decisions, and voting for literally the first time ever. And as that becomes true, like, my hope is that kind of like, I need a better analogy, but I've been saying, like, the NRA for health is like a really interesting lens about which, where you can think about these things, where you're like, the NRA is really good at taking a bunch of people who are super passionate about an issue, coordinating them and helping them generate political power, to advocate for like the single issue that they care about. And I think that there is a huge opportunity for an organization to do a similar thing when it comes to MAHA principles, and be like the organization that has decided they're going to advocate for ensuring that these like MAHA changes are a focus and are sort of at the table when it comes to politicians and policymakers discussing and thinking about what policy items and what changes they want to invest in or push for. Mm-hmm. And so that I think is like truly the most exciting thing to come out of all of the MAHA stuff.
Yeah. I think it's so cool, like how just like health is becoming mainstream, and I'm seeing, Jason Karp or Vani Hari or Calley Means on Fox News talking about health and ingredients and stuff that I've been talking about for a few years on social media. So it's just like, it's just really, really cool from an outside perspective, seeing this.
The other thing I will say too is I really, really hope that this does not, it's seemingly a partisan issue right now. I think that's like the craziest thing in the world.
Mm-hmm.
And so I feel like this is something that I really do not think should be, if anything should be a nonpartisan issue, it should be health. And right. So, yeah,
it doesn't matter what side you're on. It's health, and that's it. Yep. Like I talked about RFK a few weeks ago on my story, and just literally talked about some of the changes and the plans he plans to implement. And I got so much like pushback and hate from people being like, I can't believe you're supporting him. I'm like, no, this is health. This is not a one side or the other. This is health and ingredients and food.
Exactly. That's exactly my thought too.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's kind of crazy.
It is. It's really crazy. You mentioned the NRA for Health. So I think you wrote maybe a blog post on that as well. And so if you haven't checked it out yet, highly recommend checking out The Next, which is Justin's blog. It's incredible. It's once a month you put out a post. I think it's really thought-provoking what you put out. I had one quote that I wanted to pull. I think it's maybe from not this past one, but the one before around RCTs or randomized controlled trials and people's obsession over them. But just to set the scene here, and then would love your thoughts and expanding on this. You said, in a complex system like the human body, it's extremely hard to isolate cause and effect. RCTs are better designed for interventions that are a single intervention that creates a measurable outcome. They're extremely poorly suited for interventions that affect multiple systems within the body. So there's this idea of people being maybe anchoring on RCTs and looking for these randomized controlled trials when they're looking for outcomes. What are your general thoughts around this and how you approach health?
You've heard us talk about it before, the importance of protein. Good general rule of thumb is try to get 1 gram per pound of high quality protein every single day. Protein powders make it much easier to get the amount of protein you actually need. Problem with that is most protein powders have high levels of lead, pesticides, a bunch of other stuff you don't actually want in your body. And that's why I trust the PW1 whey protein from Puori. Their entire brand is built around the idea of testing everything with full transparency. So you know it's pure because they show you the data. Every batch of Puori, PW1 is third-party tested against more than 200 contaminants and is Clean Label Project certified. Every product has a QR code so that you know you can scan it and view your specific batch test results. PW1 is free from hormones, GMOs, pesticides, soy, gluten, and it delivers 21 grams of protein per serving. Do what I do. Add Puori PW1 whey protein to your routine now. You get an amazing 20% off, or if you choose the already discounted subscription, you get almost a third off the price. It's available when you visit my exclusive URL, puori.com/cleankitchen. Use my promo code CLEANKITCHEN, or you can save 20% off when you make a one-time purchase. Go to Puori, PUORI.com/cleankitchen. Don't wait. Go check it out right now. Puori.com/cleankitchen.
I basically think something that I struggle with at times is this idea of like what people will call sometimes in the nutrition world call like evidence-based nutrition. And when people say evidence-based, all they mean is to trust the science and ignore what's right in front of your eyes. Like ignore what you're feeling, seed oils are fine. Ignore like that you're breaking out, seed oils are fine. These studies say so. And that is not to say that we like can't learn anything from nutritional studies or anything like that. Like I would not say that at all. But I do think that nutrition studies, especially in nutrition, hugely ignore how hard it is to do a good nutrition study. Like randomized controlled trials, I think are amazing tools for running a test where you ideally control as many of the variables as possible. And then you run a test and you see just basically like what happens, like what new knowledge can we get from this thing? This is how most of human knowledge has come about. I think that they're like broadly an incredible tool. The scientific method was, obviously an amazing thing that has brought us a lot of technological progress. When it comes to nutrition though, I think that at least the way we're approaching things today, there are just too many variables to effectively control anything, which makes almost all of the nutrition studies, in my view, like basically not worth the time and energy that goes into testing them. Additionally, if you look at who funds nutrition studies, Big Food outfunds the NIH when it comes to nutrition studies, like $11 for every one the NIH spends. And these funding sources like certainly bias the outcomes of these different studies. Like I was reading something that found that on studies that were looking at the harmful effects of soda and on metabolic outcomes, it was something like 86% of studies that came from unbiased sources of funding found that there was evidence of harm there. And with biased sources of funding, it was like 11% of studies found that like there was probably something harmful here from a metabolic standpoint. So I think that there's a problem of like who's funding and what are the incentives when it comes to nutrition studies. And I think frankly the bigger problem is just it's basically impossible to control these things. Like I wrote about I wrote about basically that there are things like we are learning more about how light and circadian rhythm can impact glucose modulation, can impact digestion, can impact a bunch of things. Like if you feed rats the same food but under different sources of light, sunlight versus blue light, that's going to metabolize differently. To my knowledge, there has never been a single nutrition study where light has been controlled for. You see the same thing with like microbiome. Like you look at, there have been studies done that replicate pretty consistently where you take the microbiome of a rat that is skinny and you transplant it into the microbiome of a rat that is obese. And pretty soon, within a couple months, you see that the obese rat is now skinny. And if you do the opposite, the same effect happens. It is literally impossible to control for one's microbiome versus another, which makes, the question of like, if you're feeding someone seed oils, control group versus another group seed oils, like fat is going to be metabolized differently, almost entirely due to someone's microbiome. And so I basically, those are just two quick examples of just like, these things are really, really, really hard to control for. And I would say basically impossible, which to me leads me to believe that, and by the way, this, because these things are so hard to control for and change, this is why you'll see, 50 years ago, it was like saturated fat is like horrible and, and you're going to die if you eat it. Now the studies are like, okay, this saturated fat's probably fine. 50 years ago, it was like sugar is fine. Now it's like totally demonized. I saw one study too that was like, if you eat every handful of almonds you eat, you'll live 7 minutes longer. Like, it's just like, these things are just like such bad science. And, I think that this is just endemic in the field of nutrition. Mm-hmm. And so I think to me that leads me to two things, or two ways that you can approach making sense of how you should eat or thinking about diet. One of them is what I would call like the precautionary or ancestral health kind of principle, is like, if people have been doing it for a long period of time, probably it's pretty safe, or it's safe to assume that that thing is not going to kill you. So I think like things like eating meat, things like eating vegetables, things like, having spices and all these sorts of like culturally and ancestrally appropriate foods are probably fine from a health standpoint. And then I think people hugely underweight, what your own subjective experience. Like a lot of the seed oil crowd will look at studies done on seed oils and they're like, well, it's inconclusive. They may be right if you're relying heavily on RTTs and whatnot to decide if seed oils are good or not. But I do think a very simple, easy, reasonable thing to do is try and remove them from your diet and just see how you feel. Like, does your skin clear up? Does your digestion better? Do these things happen? And for the vast majority of people, in my experience, all of these things tend to happen when you clean up your diet. And so, okay, like, whatever, I may not have to believe that seed oils are causing all of the chronic disease conditions that we have today. But I certainly know that when I add them back in my diet, I feel bad. And when I take them out, like I feel better. And that should be enough for the vast majority of people. Now, obviously not a lot of people think that way, but I think that like these two principles are worth kind of thinking about, or ones that I think about a lot when it comes to making sense of like what to do in nutrition.
Yeah. Experiment for yourself and see how you feel. Remove something, add something, whatever it may be, and just see how your body reacts.
Exactly.
You talked about light briefly. We just had Tristan Scott. He is involved over at Daylight Computer, which I have right here. I'm curious, do you do anything for like anything with light to improve your health, like morning sunlight, blue light blockers at night, whatever it may be?
Yeah, I do both of those. So I like trying to get outside for the first 30-ish minutes of the day, each day, and then try and do like the blue light blockers at night. Now, have I noticed massive changes since doing so? No, but does it feel pretty good to be outside the first, the first part of every day? Yeah. So, so I feel pretty good.
Yeah.
Gotcha.
Yeah, that's fair. And some things it is tough. Like if you go stand outside and you ground in sunlight for 15 minutes, it's not like you're going to immediately feel it necessarily, or it's not necessarily going to be measurable. So it's something that you kind of just have to iterate on and see what works best for yourself.
For sure. And honestly, I do feel like on days where I haven't spent much time outside, like I definitely feel like it's almost like a hunger to spend more time outside or something like that. So I do notice that in myself.
Yeah, that I can completely relate to. Maybe pivoting here a little bit. So one of the things that I admire about you, Justin, is your ability to spot trends early on and really go deep on them. And just looking back at somewhat of your history, I'd seen you written some early posts, 2013 timeframe around Bitcoin and its emergence there. And then you spotted bone broth as an early trend and keto, all of those things. What is it that you're looking for to really invest your time in a trend versus something that maybe is more so trendy? And maybe where are you spending your time right now?
Yeah, good question. So where do I get it from? I mean, I think that what I am often looking for or thinking about is like, what are some things that are effective, but that people maybe don't appreciate are effective or are like scared of or averse to for some reason. Things like a paleo diet would fit in this. Like when I discovered paleo in 2011, there were a lot of people that were talking about low carb diets, talking about ancestral eating, talking about all these things. And they're having like crazy good results from doing so. And at the same time, if you ask the average person, and certainly if you ask my parents then, which I talked to them about it, I was like, what do you guys think of trying to eat fewer processed foods and all of that? They would basically say like they didn't really think that made a difference in health. They couldn't understand the reasons why you would want to do that. All these kinds of things. And so I think I felt similarly with psychedelics too. When I discovered psychedelics in 2016, 2017, you look and you're like, there's a long cultural history of cultures using these things. Generally, they use them for personal growth or other sorts of things at a time when they didn't have pharmaceuticals to try and help with mental health or like anything along those lines. And they tend to be very effective. You talk to people that use psychedelics and they like credit them with huge amounts of personal transformation. And yet most of the culture is afraid of it, doesn't know what it is, is scared of it, whatever it is. And so I think that this like thing works, but the culture doesn't know or appreciate that it works is like a very interesting place, place to think about and a place to, it's generative from an ideas standpoint. And so I'm very often thinking about like, where are there pockets of truth or like pockets of things that people are already doing that work and are effective? And then just figure out like, okay, how can I assume or try and work to bring that thing more into the culture or more into broad awareness? I also think it helps a lot to be intellectually curious and like spend a lot of time with kind of people that have weird ideas. Like I probably have more conversations than almost anyone I know with people that I think have like totally crazy and wrong ideas. But that's sort of the cost of like occasionally getting exposed to someone that thinks differently and thinks something is true that, that tends to be like more evidence-based than I necessarily might have thought before talking to them.
Yeah. Yeah, the contrarian perspective can be a very powerful one. But I feel like what you do a good job of is there actually has to be some truth to it first.
Yes.
It can't just be contrarian to be contrarian.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
There. Yeah.
Well, and I also think that I hugely value what I would call like this idea of lindiness, this idea that like if something has been around for a long period of time, like Shakespeare, it's much more likely that Shakespeare, people are still reading 2,000 years from now than any bestseller that is written this year. Just because like things that have persisted for a long period of time are highly likely to persist. And so when I look at something like, like even bone broth, for example, it's like people have been eating bone broth for literally millions of years. If you look at psychedelics, people have been using and getting benefit from psychedelics for literally like hundreds of thousands of years from a cultural standpoint. And so the fact that like bone broth is not in the diet today, the fact that psychedelics are not widely used today, both of these things seem to me much more like historical anomalies and thus opportunities than they do seem like this is the way that things always have been. And so I think that lens is really useful when thinking about, what are likely to be trends and what things are likely to do well. And it's a big reason why I've spent so much of my time focused on the food system, on chronic disease, on all these kinds of things, because it is like almost impossible to imagine that 100 years from now, today, like 80% of Americans are obese or overweight, 93% have like one metabolic marker of dysfunction. It's almost impossible to imagine 50 years from now or 100 years from now, we're sicker than we are today. And we like haven't figured out this problem. Like this is obviously a problem that we're going to figure out at some point. And so I think it's an important one and one that I want to spend time trying to address.
It's tough, not Justin, to ask you about your little Twitter back and forth here with one of the founders of the David Bar. I wanted to dissect this a little bit. So David Bar is a newer protein bar that's out, and the founders are formerly from RX Bar. I think another one you just posted about, Jumbles.
Yeah,
I'm not even sure of the name there. Hornbull Stromels.
Founders basically like made a bunch of money selling the world's cleanest protein bar up to that point, and now they're both leaning hard into the like, science backed but very, very, very processed direction, which I think is stupid.
Yeah, it's crazy to me. So yeah, you're so successful going down the natural ingredient route, and then you pivot here. What is the thinking here from your perspective? Maybe you can even broaden it to just generally all of these companies greenwashing their products.
Yeah, so to be like more charitable to them, I don't necessarily think that they view it as like greenwashing or like, saying that their stuff is healthy. Like they probably, like, to be in their, in their shoes, they're probably saying like Americans don't get enough protein. Big reason people don't eat enough protein is because like it's very satiating. And so if you can deliver a low calorie, high protein bar, like that would be great for people's health, because all these studies show that, higher protein leads to muscle mass. Muscle mass is one of the best things for longevity. That's kind of like my steel man of their approach. Where I think that I would disagree with their approach is I think that what they are doing is they're relying on one ingredient called EPG, which is basically they like take rapeseed oil, a seed oil, they process it one more time, they esterify it, and then they put that in the bar. The reason David Bar is like so low calorie is because the FDA has effectively said that because this fat, which is in your bar, is not digested, it like just runs through your system. It doesn't count from a calorie standpoint. So only like things that you eat that are digested actually count from a caloric intake standpoint. And so that is why it is so low calorie, but can still be high protein. They're using it as a binder, but they're just assuming that because this thing just runs through you, it's totally fine. I think that this ingredient is basically like fails. Let me rewind. If you look at the last 70 years of food science history, we had things like trans fats that came on the scene in like the 70s, 60s or 70s. And it was considered this miracle. Like butter would go bad, in products, it would oxidize, it would send the flavor off, it would make a product bad. People would sometimes get sick from it. And so we invented trans fats, these like very shelf stable fats that were incredible. They were doing all these things. People ate it all the time. And an estimated like 8 million people died of heart disease thanks to like trans fat consumption. And so I think that our history of inventing novel ingredients and putting them in a bunch of foods that people consume all the time is like really, really bad. I can't even think of like a single ingredient that we have invented in the last 70 years that people consume all of the time in large quantities that hasn't somehow had a negative impact down the line. Seed oils literally might be the best counterexample for those who like think that they're not that bad. So what these guys are doing is they are bringing this new fat onto the market. They're building their entire product suite around it. David Bar is, now today a bar. They're also launching like chips and ice cream at some point soon. Again, using these like EPG as a fat. And my concern on this is just like I said earlier, I think it is one of these things that just fails this, like, has this been around for a long period of time? Are humans likely to be able to digest this and get nutrition from it without any downsides? To me, on both senses, the answer is no. The only reason that this ingredient exists is because the US follows something called GRAS, generally recognized as safe approach to regulating new ingredients. And what that means is they basically say, if you invent a new ingredient, you can just tell the FDA, hey, this is safe. Like, we're going to start introducing this in the food supply. You don't have to show them safety data. You don't have to run longitudinal studies, anything like this. And so this ingredient is GRAS approved. I looked it up. There's been like 48 studies on GRAS or on EPG. All but 4 of them were in animals. And the 4 that were in humans were just looking at like digestibility, nutrient absorption, and stuff like this. And so can you eat a David Bar and like assume, can you eat a David Bar? Yes, for sure. A bunch of people are eating them. Will it kill you right away? No. It seems like the answer is no. But is it something like that you want to eat all of the time based on how few studies have been done on this? And based on, in my view, the very, very high likelihood that this ingredient has some sort of downside that we don't understand yet. I definitely would not be consuming these things. And generally, I just struggle when companies like this come along and say like, we've solved it. This is the healthiest thing. Like, this is a totally fine ingredient. And they're doing it off of studies that are like short-term, haven't even looked at, a bunch of like potential negative health outcomes. And are just like selling it everywhere now, touting it as like the best way to get protein or the best healthy thing. I just struggle. I really frustrates me.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm seeing this bar everywhere. Everyone's posting about it. It's like, oh, it's got the best macros and the lowest calorie, all this. And what is it? It shows up as, it's like modified plant starch. And then in parentheses, it says EPG. Is that right?
I think it's a modified plant oil or something like that.
Okay.
But yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. So something to watch out there for everyone listening. Modified plant oil.
And again,
EPG.
like if you read the comments or one of these things, if you read the comments on these bars, like a bunch of people have had digestive issues with this. And it's like, yeah, this is like a fat that is meant to be undigested and it's going right through you. And like on a couple of the human studies that they've done, they're seeing that it changes how your body seems to digest and uptake certain vitamins. Like it seemed to impair, vitamin B and vitamin K absorption. Like, is that a big deal? I don't know. But if you're eating one every day, like it certainly seems like the type of thing that'd be worth looking into.
Yeah. It's this first principles thinking. It feels like you're the way you've thought through the process is completely first principles. I know this, thus this. And so I think a lot of people struggle with that.
Yeah. Whereas they're looking at it and they're like, there have been 4 studies and no one has died. And so we should make a bar that is based on this. And like, no one is going to sue us. No one's going to regulate us out of existence. And so let's launch it and we can make all these amazing claims that will get a bunch of people to, pay us a bunch of money. And it seems to be happening,
Yeah. Yeah. It does seem to be working for what they want.
Yeah. I mean, do I think it's a good thing? Absolutely not. But are they seemingly selling a bunch of product? Yeah. So,
Yeah. So you've got a long history, Justin, of being an entrepreneur. I think maybe the past 12 to 15 years, you've had at least some hand in the entrepreneurship world. Is there any product out there that you've thought of that never made it to market? Something that stalled out in its infancy?
Yeah. I mean, that I've seen or thought of like building?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, there was a time where I was looking at launching like potential or scoping out potentially doing like a supplement. It seems like there's certain probiotic strains that can help with microplastic exposure and some of these other things. And so there was a time where I was looking at doing that. Like, could you invent or bring to market a probiotic that would help people with microplastic, PFAS, BPA, like all of the environmental toxins that we're exposed to today. And so I was looking at that at one point, eventually decided not to do it. But that was something that I thought was a good idea, and I think there's still some demand for, but for various, variety of reasons, just decided wasn't really a fit for what I wanted to spend all my time on.
Yeah, that's fair.
It helps you like that would help you detox these things out of your body.
Yeah, I mean, it would help with detox and also with help with mitigation. Like, there's some pretty weird and interesting studies around, if you have certain strains of bacteria in your gut, when you're getting exposed to phthalates and microplastics and other things, they basically just like eat and encapsulate them, which is kind of interesting.
No, I was going to say, that's super interesting. Were there any other business ideas or anything like that you started, but then didn't follow through on?
Not, I mean, I've like dug into a bunch of stuff, but that was one that like went kind of farther along.
Got it.
Yeah, I mean, there's a bunch of stuff that I want to start. Like I was on My First Million a couple of weeks ago talking about how I think there's like a huge opportunity to start a modern butcher shop today. Like basically, I think that the meat space is sort of where coffee was in the 70s before Starbucks and other companies came along. Is like most meat is undifferentiated. It's sold on a styrofoam tray in the grocery store. People are not talking about like age, nutrition, feed, genetics, any of these things. And I think that there's like a ton of demand and frankly, like price elasticity. Like you can charge way more for a very high quality meat, and most retailers are only stocking like 1-2 versions. So I just think there's like a very interesting opportunity to build what I would call like a modern butcher shop that has a much larger variety of meat options for people that are interested.
Yeah. Absolutely. There's no like brand name meat. I mean, I think if you're really
Applegate Farms is the closest. Yeah, but it's not many.
No, not many at all. Whereas brand name coffee, people ride or die.
Exactly.
Whoever they prefer.
And this makes a big difference. Like genetics make a big difference. How you raise it makes a big difference. How you age it makes a big difference from a flavor nutrient standpoint. And so I think it's like a very big opportunity.
Yeah, definitely. Did you say your friend was starting a butcher shop in Austin?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, my friend started a company called Radius that's in Austin, and they're like probably, I think, one of the best grocery stores now in the country. And they're doing this like modern butcher shop thing. But I think that there's like room, just like every city had, even in the 70s or 80s, like many cities had a great coffee shop. And then Starbucks came along and like brought that experience to the masses. I think there's a similar kind of opportunity in the meat space.
Yeah. Do you envision a bunch of people sitting around like at a coffee shop, maybe eating like a jerky or something like that? Or is it different in your mind?
Probably not. Yeah, it's probably like people picking up and buying, buying meat from a place that just takes sourcing and aging and prepping meat like really, really seriously.
Yeah,
that's kind of what I think is most likely.
Yeah, interesting.
What are your thoughts on all of these smaller healthy companies getting bought out, like Siete, Poppy, Lesser Evil, brands like that? I just like wanted to get your overall thoughts on that.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a right and a wrong way to do it. I think that I think it's good from the sense of like, at the end of the day, you basically want better for you products to be as accessible to as many people as possible. And Big Food, in my view, is like good at one thing, and that is bringing the cost down on food that they distribute. They have retailer relationships. They have crazy warehouses, and like all these things have been optimized for, in many cases, like 100+ years to deliver the lowest cost possible to the end consumer. So I think that's good. I think that there are ways that you can bake in certain principles when you sell the company. Like I know that there are some companies that have said, hey, we're going to sell to you, General Mills, but you can never change X, Y, and Z about our sourcing or our product or ingredients or whatever. And I think that there are ways in which some of these small companies can help these big companies understand where the trend is, where these trends are going, and get ahead of them. Like when Epic sold to General Mills, they were instrumental in driving change from the inside and getting General Mills to commit to sourcing 1 million acres of regenerative. That's something that probably General Mills would not have done on their own without buying Epic. So I think there's a good way to do it, but it really just depends. Like the founders have to be willing to say, here are the criteria that we want to never change after we sell. And that might potentially in some cases, though I don't know of any specifics, like maybe that comes with price trade-offs, or maybe that restricts your buyer universe. You know what I mean? Like if you're selling to Dr. Pepper or Coke or something like that, can you really tell them that they never can add sugar to the thing? Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Might be hard.
Yeah. They might laugh you right out of the room if you tell them that.
Yeah. I mean, it might impact the price that they're willing to pay. And so, yeah, I think it really is dependent on the specific situation. Is it my favorite thing in the world? No, but at the same time, there's frankly not a like great set of options for these small companies. Like it's incredibly hard to take a single brand company public. And, if you're not going to do that, then you're just competing with structurally high costs of capital in a business that relies a lot on the cost of goods to the end consumer. And so it's just hard. There's a big reason that you've seen basically 0 food companies go public in the last, I don't know how many years.
Yeah. Yeah, basically Human Co is the only one I can even think of where it's like a conglomerate of better for you options that are out there.
Yeah, and like, well, and they're not public,
right.
And that is like, there are a bunch of relatively smallish brands that are kind of trying to get operational leverage by bundling together a bunch of things. I mean, there's been Sovos, there's been Amplify that have gone public, but those are basically like 2 or 3 brands that had material scale. Chobani tried to go public, didn't really happen. It's just really hard to figure out what to do with these brands after they hit certain amounts of scale. Just tough.
Yeah. Business logistics.
It's a weird sector. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. Okay. Maybe digging through the archives here as we kind of wrap up here. You wrote a post back in 2013 called Entrepreneurship and Envy, and you wrote specifically about this idea of success. This was long before Kettle and Fire. So I just wanted to maybe get your thoughts on it here and where you are now, maybe looking back. And you wrote, success, while awesome, I'm sure, also locks you into things. If you have a successful exit, pressure is greater for your next company. If you're the founder of a hot startup, the pressure is to improve upon that success. If Roommate Fit doesn't work out within the next year, I can take time to travel, work with anyone I want, start something new, take on new projects, or work a job and relax for a while. Such freedom of choice shouldn't be taken for granted. What is it like hearing those own words that you wrote 12 years ago now and looking back on your life?
You all are deep in the archives. It's impressive.
We went digging.
I think it's very true. I I do think that there's an increased, at the time, I think I was like, wanted to do I would do pretty much anything to build a company that I thought was going to work. And I think the thing that changes is there an increased level of pressure after having some wins? Definitely. But at the same time, like, I feel like I've found a mission, and in some ways, like, taking a bigger swing that is in line with what I want to try and do or influence in the world is just like more exciting at the same time. And so I think it's really like I think there's pros and cons to it, like anything, but definitely I would take this set of trade-offs over the ones that I had earlier. Like at a certain point in your life, I think optimizing for freedom and optionality is like not necessarily the right thing to optimize for.
What are you optimizing for right now in your life?
I think it's like optimizing for a good day-to-day, optimizing for impact, and optimizing for interesting work with values aligned people is like pretty much the thing that I get most excited about today.
Yeah.
And none of those are like traveling, working with anyone, like all the stuff that I used to think like would be really cool or that I really valued.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Evolved over time.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Fantastic. Kyle, any other questions for Justin?
No, I think that's a perfect place to end it. Appreciate your time, Justin.
Yeah. Thanks, guys. This was great.
Yeah. Incredible. Any other resources, Justin, you want to leave the audience with?
No, I mean, I think we talked a little bit about my Substack. It's probably like the best area to catch up on kind of some of the things that I'm thinking about researching, writing about. It's justinmares.substack.com. But otherwise, check out Kettle and Fire, TrueMed, and that's pretty much all I got.
Sounds great. Appreciate it, Justin.
Thanks, guys.
Yeah.
Thanks,
Justin.
Thanks.
Thank you for listening to the Clean Kitchen Podcast. This is a Wellness Loud production produced by Drake Peterson and mixed by Mike Frey. If you like this episode, don't forget to share it with your friends, subscribe, and give us a 5-star rating. For more shows by my team, go to wellnessloud.com. The Clean Kitchen Podcast is for general informational purposes only and does not constitute the practice of medicine, nursing, or other professional healthcare services, including the giving of medical advice, and no doctor-patient relationship is formed. The content of this podcast is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Users should not disregard or delay in obtaining medical advice for any medical condition they may have and should seek the assistance of their healthcare professionals for any such conditions. As always, talk to your doctor or health team first.